Where do we go? She gasped, both exhilarated and terrified as he tugged her along. Danger and adrenaline were exquisite dancers, making her heart race, yet every part of her wanted to freeze at the proximity of his body next to hers, the way his presence wrapped around her, protective and all-consuming. "Follow me," he urged, pulling her into a side alley just as another blast thundered behind them, debris showering down like rain. Zaire ducked, shielding her with his body, and for a breath of a moment, she let out a soft laugh, bitter and edged with relief. "I've always wanted a knight in shining armor," she quipped, trying to lighten the mood despite her racing pulse. "Yeah, well, this knight forgot his armor," he replied, a sardonic smile flickering across his face just before the tension wrapped around them again. His eyes, dark and expressive, searched hers, wondering if she understood just how far he'd go to keep her safe. "Zaire," she whispered, her voice quaking slightly. She could see the flicker of fear buried beneath his confident exterior, despite the circumstances. The stakes were high. "You don't have to do this alone." He took a breath, and for just a heartbeat he was vulnerable. Zaire, the stoic protector, the man who had seen too much darkness, letting a crack of uncertainty seep through. "Sefina, this isn't just my battle. I can't lose you." The admission came out in a rush, heavy and expensive like a bridge built over the chasm of their complicated history. "Neither can I," she replied, her eyes locking onto his, the unspoken understanding deepening. The weight of sorrow, secrets, and desires floated between them in the chaotic air, an unacknowledged yearning that made her heart twist. Suddenly, the ground rumbled underfoot, and she felt the heat from the flames that roared behind them, a stark reminder that time was slipping through their fingers as quickly as their unacknowledged feelings. "We need to move," Zaire shouted again, his voice breaking the tension. They sprinted further down the alley, the storm still building, rain pounding down like a drumbeat of urgency. "Do you really think this is going to stop us?" she teased, a flicker of defiance in her tone, even as fear laced her words. "I've endured worse, like waiting for you to call back." He let out a dark chuckle, the strain easing just a little between them, warming the frigid air. "You have no idea how much I wanted to, but I didn't want to scare you off." "Bullseye, Zaire," she countered, the banter alive and electric. "You're the one scaring me now." Their laughter mingled with the night, a brief, soft chaos amidst the explosions, binding them against the chaos of their surroundings. The alley opened into a courtyard where the night transformed once more, a scene unfolding like a gripping tableau. A parked car sputtered ominously, its driver unconscious, and a gang of shadowy figures fanned out, aiming for Zaire as he ushered Sefina behind him, towering and formidable. "I'll take them," he said flatly, his demeanor shifting into a cold, calculating gaze. "No, Zaire," she countered fiercely, pushing past him. "This isn't just your fight anymore. We do this together." And together they would face whatever came next. Scene 64, Loyalty Tested. The air in the dimly lit cafe buzzed with the faint scent of roasted coffee and baked goods, a comforting backdrop to the tension brewing beneath the surface. Sefina Agbo stood behind the counter, absently polishing a ceramic mug that was far too small for the heavy emotional weight clinging to her. Each stroke of the cloth spoke volumes of anxiety, of the choices she'd made, of the man whose dark, hidden life intertwined with hers. Across the cafe, Zaire Oladipo leaned against the wall, arms crossed, a muscle in his jaw twitching as he tracked the movements of patrons with eyes like storm clouds. His presence filled the space, solid, powerful, underlying an intensity that could ignite the room. With the shades drawn down against the fading light, their world felt both intimate and fraught, as if the walls were witnesses to a duel of unspoken words. Sefina placed the mug down, her breath hitching as she caught Zaire's gaze. He raised an eyebrow, challenging her to glance away, to engage in the mundane chatter of the cafe's regulars, or comment on the weather. But instead, the air crackled between them, a charged current illuminating what they both desperately sought to deny. "Do you think Mirage is going to show at midnight like he said?" Sefina spoke, her voice lighter than she felt. It was a familiar deflection, a dance around the truth she couldn't quite bear to address the shadows lurking behind Zaire's eyes. "Mirage shows up, but I don't know what version," Zaire replied, his tone more gravelly than she remembered. The one who's all charm and deception, or the one who knows too much? Like you? She shot back, her heart pounding. The edges of their conversation were sharp, the implications sharper still. Would he confirm the suspicions she'd harbored, the doubts that chased away her dreams at night? But his response was muted, his gaze never straying from hers, full of meanings wrapped in layers. I'm nothing like him, Sefina. He advanced, closing the distance, and she could see in the depth of his brown eyes the shadows of battles fought and lost. His voice softened, carrying an urgency that curled around her thoughts. You have to trust me. Trust? She let out a breath, almost a laugh, the sound colorful against the grayness of tension. Isn't that the tricky thing? You don't even show all your cards. A flutter of doubt spiraled in her chest. Where had that urge to push him away come from? Because I'm trying to protect you. Zaire's temper flared, his frustration boiling over like simmering coffee. Do you think this is easy for me? Easy? No, but essential? A sizzling retort lingered between them. You're protecting what? Yourself or your secrets? Recognition sparked in his expression, something dark and menacing, a secret laid bare. There are things you don't know about my past, Sefina. It's not just about you. Sefina stepped closer, emboldened and terrified. What if I want to know? She challenged, her fingers brushing against the cool marble counter as if steadying herself. What if I'm tired of living in the shadows? At that, Zaire held her gaze longer, the silence stretched taut. And what would that mean for us? He murmured, and the question hung like stale air between them, a dagger, a promise, a chance too precarious to grasp. Before she could respond, the cafe door swung open with a loud chime, startling them both. A familiar face entered, their friend Mullik, with a panicked expression that sent a jolt through the atmosphere. Zaire, Mullik called breathlessly, and Sefina's heart dropped. You're needed. It's urgent. Zaire's demeanor shifted instantly, the warmth evaporating. He straightened, tension radiating from his entire frame. What's going on? They've got eyes all around, man. We're compromised, Malik explained. We need to move. Sefina's mind raced, her earlier bravado flaking away in the face of real danger. Zaire's hand brushed against hers, a ghost of warmth before he stepped back, the protective silhouette she longed for disappearing into the reality of survival. Stay safe, Sefina, please, he said, urgency in his voice, laced with something that sounded like desperation. I'll be here, she promised, though the tremor in her voice betrayed her. As Zaire and Malik hurried out into the encroaching night, Sefina felt the weight of isolation settle back over her, raw, unfiltered. She reached for the mug again, her fingers gripping it tightly, a talisman against the menacing shadows growing around her. Her heart echoed the sentiment Zaire had sown. Was trust really a game, or was it the only way through the labyrinth of darkness facing them both? Scene 65, Into the Light. The flickering light of the single overhead bulb cast a soft halo over Zaire and Sefina, illuminating the tension that hung between them like static electricity. They stood in the small, cluttered room of Sefina's studio, surrounded by half-finished canvases and scattered brushes, a stark reminder of her once vibrant world, now draped in uncertainty. Do you think happiness is something we chase, or is it more like a good vintage something that quietly matures under the right conditions? Sefina asked, her voice light but laced with vulnerability. She absent-mindedly wiped her paint-streaked hands on a nearby rag, the texture catching her attention even as her eyes flicked to him, searching for answers in his gaze. Zaire clasped his hands, his knuckles white against the backdrop of his dark skin. A slight, tense smile twitched at the corners of his lips, but his eyes betrayed a deeper turmoil. Depends on the person. Some people seem to just stumble into it, he replied, his voice low and smooth, flowing like the deep midnight ocean, powerful, yet soothing. Then there are those who grumble and groan and never seem to find it. Sefina raised an eyebrow, crossing her arms. And which one am I? She challenged, tilting her head slightly, a playful defiance flickering in her eyes despite the weight hanging in the air between them. Gradually, an involuntary smile tugged at her lips, breaking the tension momentarily before curiosity seized her again. Or better yet? Zaire leaned slightly forward, his voice almost a whisper, filled with an electric charge that sent shivers up her spine. What do you think you are? Her question hung, charged, as the air between them thickened and the shadows danced playfully, revealing the subtle line between the mundane and the intimate. Zaire's bemused gaze held hers for a beat too long, and it felt as if the world outside the narrow window faded into the background, the city's hum muted by the intensity of the moment. "If I'm being honest," he finally said, a flicker of vulnerability escaping his crafted facade, "I'm the guy trying to protect the most beautiful mess in this room." "Mess?" She laughed gently, her voice a melody that soothed the brief ache in his chest. "Have you seen your own life? Talk about chaotic." The warmth of her laughter enveloped him, but the smile quickly faded as the weight of their unspoken truth settled around them. Zaire shifted on his feet, unable to hide his clenched jaw. "My chaos doesn't touch yours. This world you're trying to create, to navigate through." He gestured to the canvases, a hint of admiration lacing his voice. "It's beautiful. It's everything I find myself fighting for." With each word, the wall he'd built around himself began to crack, and the tension morphed. Sefina stepped closer, the smell of paint and turpentine swirling around them, as familiar as the pulse of her racing heart. She saw the flicker of hope buried beneath Zaire's stoic exterior, and it ignited something within her, a reckless desire to bridge the chasm between them. "Then why do I feel so hopeless?" In her plea there was a rawness, a longing that echoed throughout the small room. The sparkle of determination in her eyes faded momentarily, replaced by earnest vulnerability. "Because you're meant for more than just surviving," he replied, inching closer, his voice thick with intensity. "And I can't let anything take that away from you, Sefina. I won't." The air crackled as reality shifted, their proximity bringing undeniable warmth. Sefina could hear the rhythmic cadence of his breath, the quiet determination woven through his every word. She reached out, fingers grazing his arm, a simple touch yet lingering like a declaration. "Zaire," she started, their eyes locked, and the world around them dimmed as they stood on the precipice of a storm neither one dared to voice fully. He leaned in closer, the space between them charged, the tension palpable enough to savor. He lowered his voice, almost conspiratorially. "We'll face it together. No more hiding, Sefina. Whatever the darkness throws at us, I've got you." "Promise?" she whispered, every syllable charged with an urgency that echoed her heart's race. Zaire's gaze was steady, unwavering. "Always." As they breathed into that promise, she felt a flicker of light, and in that moment she began to glimpse a future not just filled with chaos, but one glimmering with the potential for true happiness. Scene 66, An Unforeseen Sacrifice. The evening air throbbed with the smell of impending rain, vibrant and electric like a heartbeat. Zaire Oladipo stood behind the heavy wooden door of Sefina's studio, pulses of hurried breath echoing in the confined space, clashing with the distant hum of city life outside. His heart raced not just from fear, but from the weight of choices he'd made or failed to make. Shadows danced across the walls, flickering in the dim light, creating an illusion of movement that mirrored the turmoil within him. With a weary sigh, he shifted his focus. "Sefina, we need to move, now." His voice, low and insistent, sliced through the atmosphere. He could feel the rapid rhythm of his own pulse thrumming in his ears, but his attention was riveted on her. She stood by the window, the last remnants of the sunset casting her delicate silhouette in hues of orange and indigo. Her eyes were wide, pinched with worry, yet they sparkled with defiance. "Zaire, I won't run again. Not from you. Not from this." Her words reverberated within him, spearing straight through the stoic veneer he put on for her sake. He stepped closer, the soft creak of the floorboards under his weight a reminder of their precarious reality. "This isn't just about us, they're coming for you." "No, they're coming for you," she interrupted, her tone imbued with a fierceness Zaire had admired yet feared. "You think I'll let them dictate my life? I won't hide away like a coward while you battle your demons." Zaire felt a volley of frustration surge, mixing with something deeper, a desire to shield her from the darkness he'd entangled her in. "This isn't a game, Sefina. You don't understand how high the stakes are," he said, his voice taut with urgency. "I'm not some delicate flower you can protect from the storm, Zaire." Her voice cracked slightly, the vulnerability breaking through, only to be laced with her unwavering spirit. "You're the storm, don't you see? The world you're navigating is terrifying, but I have a stake in this too. As the tension filled the air between them, demanding resolution, a dark, unfamiliar sound rumbled from the street, a vehicle skidding to a halt outside, tires screeching against asphalt. Zaire's heart dropped. "Sefina," he warned, grabbing her wrist and pulling her toward a battered wooden cabinet, the kind that could obscure them if they crouched low enough. They tumbled into the cramped space, the mahogany scent filling their nostrils, overriding the tension lingering in the air. Sefina's breath was hot against his cheek, igniting something primal in him. Zaire dared a glance at her, watching the way her face was lit by the remaining slivers of light. She was beautiful, shadows outlining her cheekbones and highlighting her determined glare. "Zaire, if this is the end," she began, but he pressed a finger against her lips, silencing her. He couldn't bear those words. "It's not," he insisted, his voice barely a whisper, yet it carried the weight of desperation. "You're stronger than you think, and I won't let them take you from me." As footsteps approached, heavy and deliberate, Zaire could feel a ruptured thread of bravery weaving through his chest. "We might have to face this together," he said. "No," she started again, but his fingers gripped her shoulder with lingering intensity. "We will fight, with every ounce of strength we have." Suddenly, the door burst open, swinging wildly on its hinges. A flood of menacing figures filled the threshold, their eyes dark and intent. Zaire instinctively leaned towards Sefina, shielding her with his body. Instincts kicked in, the visceral protective urge morphing into action like a flash of lightning. "Zaire," she gasped, her voice a mix of fear and undeniable determination. "Don't you dare sacrifice yourself for me." "Shh, just trust me," he murmured, urgency flowing between them, carving a path them not just in conflict, but in an unyielding connection. Amidst the chaos, Zaire realized that he'd faced away from the darker truths lurking in the shadows of their story. Now, as threats loomed large, the sacrifice he had to make loomed larger, a truth he could no longer evade. "This isn't just about survival," he declared, meeting her startled gaze, tracing the contours of her face as if she held the answers. "It's about freedom." And just like that, the ever-present storm loomed larger, obscuring what was once clear, but Zaire stood firm, ready to protect all they had built, no matter the cost. Scene 67, Rescue at Dawn. The chill of dawn lingered in the air, wrapping the world in a frosty blanket that crunched softly beneath Zaire Oladipo's polished shoes. He stood under the awning of an old brick building, his breath forming a cloud of anxiety that mingled with the creeping mist. The bustling sounds of the city waking around him, cars humming to life, a dog barking playfully, almost felt alien, a stark contrast to the urgent pounding of his heart. Zaire checked his watch, its surface reflecting his worry. "Come on, Sefina." The words slipped past his lips, though no one was there to hear him. He was alone, directed by an urgency not just to find her, but to protect her from a danger that clawed at the edges of his mind, a danger that he had unwittingly introduced into her life. Glancing skyward, he caught sight of a slate-gray cloud rolling in, mirroring his tumultuous thoughts. As thunder rumbled softly in the distance, he sprinted down the street, the pavement slick with dew, his mind racing through the clues he'd pieced together over the past few days. He pushed through the glass door of a small cafe, the scent of sizzling bacon and brewing coffee hitting him like a wave of nostalgia. "You're not really doing this right now," he muttered to himself, but he allowed the warmth to cradle him for just a moment. "Hey there, Mr. Broody," called a cheerful voice from behind the counter. It was Naomi, the barista, with a grin like sunshine. Her playful energy could cut through the heaviest atmosphere. "Waiting for someone? Or just hoping to steal my heart over a cup of joe?" He managed to smile, though his heart wasn't in it. "Just on a morning quest. From the looks of it, you'd need a Viking hat to rally your troops." She winked, handing him a steaming cup with a flourish. "Coffee helps clear the mind. It also makes you more attractive. Science." As he took a sip, the rich warmth spread through him, igniting his senses. "You should write a book. On coffee, or how to charm a guy like you," she replied, leaning in playfully, eyes sparkling with mischief. Zaire chuckled, but his mind raced back to Sefina and that dark, tangled web she hadn't woven for herself. "I've got to." "Right, not just charming, but madly in love," she interrupted with a theatrical gasp. "You've got that look. Are you two finally spilling your hearts out?" You've got me all wrong. He sighed, his frustration mixing with an undeniable longing. It's not that easy. She's complicated. Complicated can be good, she said, waving a hand. Think of it like coffee and chocolate. A bit bitter, a bit sweet. Together, heavenly. Can't argue with that. He chuckled, yet the weight of his reality pressed down harder. I'm just hoping to save her. Don't we all need saving from something? Naomi replied, her eyes narrowing slightly, the lightness flickering like the cafe's neon sign. Sounds like you should get moving then, Captain Save-A-Lot. Zaire pushed through the door once more, exiting into an expanding gray canvas that suddenly threatened rain. Each footfall roared in his ears, a pulse that quickened with every step toward her last known location. He envisioned the myriad of scenarios, each more terrifying than the last. The sky deepened into an ominous hue, an echo of the tumult swirling within him as he reached her apartment building. He didn't know what risks awaited, but he was willing to face them all. Rain began to fall in heavy sheets, drenching him to the skin, but he barely noticed. Each drop felt like a countdown. Then, as he turned the final corner, his heart dropped at the sight ahead. Two figures loomed outside Sefina's door, their silhouettes dark against the crumbling wall. Get away from her, Zaire shouted, his voice slicing through the storm. The men turned, surprise flashing across their faces. You think you can save her? One sneered, stepping forward, menace dripping from his words. No one threatens Sefina. Zaire stepped closer, his body taut with energy, shadows swirling around him like a cloak. The air crackled with a tension so thick he could almost taste it. But then, rising above the chant of the rain, he envisioned Sefina's laughter, the warmth of her embrace, and his resolve strengthened. Let her go, he demanded, feeling the weight of his promise unearth in his chest. The world flared bright amid the gathering storm, and in that moment, Zaire knew he would fight for her, ready to dive into the chaos with Sefina's name etched in his mind. Let's see how this plays out, one of the figures replied with a smirk. But you'll need more than courage to back that up. Zaire tightened his grip on the storm within, using it as fuel as he stepped forward, ready to face whatever came next, determined to save the only thing that mattered. Scene 68, A Moment of Truth. The sun hung low in the sky, splintering through the wet leaves and dappled the ground in hues of gold and green. There was a tangible stillness in the air, the kind that precedes an emotional thunderstorm. Sefina Agbo leaned against the rough bark of an old oak, her arms crossed defensively over her chest, eyes fixed on a spot across the garden. Each breath carried the rich scent of earth after rain, making her heart ache with unsaid words. Zaire Oladipo stepped closer, his presence an electric current that made the air hum. He ran a hand through his dark curls, casting a quick glance at Sefina, his brow furrowed, a hint of worry shadowing his warm demeanor. You're quiet today. Sefina remained focused on the ground, biting her lower lip as if weighing her next words like stones. Can you blame me? She finally turned to him, her voice silvered with doubt. Everything seems precarious. I feel like I'm just waiting for you to make a move, for everything to change. He took a step forward, studying her expression. The corner of his mouth lifted, teasing yet uncertain. Were you expecting fireworks then? A grand gesture? She rolled her eyes, though a hint of a smile tugged at her lips, offering a flicker of ease amidst the tension. You know me well enough for that. I was expecting clarity, honesty, maybe. Zaire leaned against the oak beside her, their shoulders brushing, a warmth lingering like a tingle of anticipation. So what's stopping you? The air thickened between them, and Sefina's eyes flicked to his, laden with the weight of unspoken fears. I'm terrified. I feel like a pawn in your game, Zaire, just a piece you can move around at will. His jaw clenched at her words, a flash of vulnerability crossing his handsome face. You think my life is a game? You think I think you're powerful, she interrupted, her voice rising, sparking with emotion. But you draw the line between where I stand and where you choose to be. It's infuriating. Infuriating? His voice was low, the rich timbre thick with an intensity that sent tremors through her. Sefina, you think I don't care? You think I'm playing? Every time I see you, I'm reminded just how much I can lose. Silence fell heavily, the world dimming as she caught his gaze. His dark eyes held storms, and she felt a shiver skimming down her spine. His presence was magnetic, drawing her closer despite her fears. "You don't get it," she murmured, her heart racing louder than her thoughts. "I fought so hard to rebuild myself from the ashes. It wreaks havoc on my brain to think I could end up in someone else's game again. I refuse to be anyone's pawn." Zaire's expression softened, and he moved closer, bridging the space between them. "I'm not the enemy, Sefina. I'm trying to protect you, to show you there's something real here." She could feel the heat radiating from him, the subtle scent of cologne intermingling with the garden's earthy aroma. It swirled together, a sweet intoxication, and for a fleeting moment she allowed herself to believe he was sincere and genuine. "Is that what you want?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "A real connection? Can you promise me I won't just end up another piece to manage?" Zaire reached out, his fingers brushing lightly against her arm, igniting awareness beneath her skin. There was no barrier between them now. The world around them faded into a canvas of smoky twilight hues. "I can promise you this. I won't let anyone harm you. Not while I'm alive." Sefina held his gaze, breathless, the tension stretching taut between their shared breath. Every beat of her heart echoed the truth she longed to speak, yet the doubt nestled inside her held her captive, tying her tongue like a gossamer thread. "Then fight for more than that," she said, resolve blossoming in her voice. "Show me that I'm not just a piece on a chessboard. You have to let me choose my own moves, Zaire." He swallowed hard, the truth of her words settling deep between them. "You think I'll let you make those moves alone?" His voice softened. "I want us both to win, Sefina. Together." "I want that too," she breathed, inching closer. The air shimmered with promise, yet doubt still lingered, casting shadows upon their newfound territory. "Then let me show you how," he whispered, and for the first time, the line between them felt less like a divide and more like a bridge, yearning to close the gap. As the sky turned to indigo, Sefina dared to take a step onto the precipice of trust, her breath catching at the edge of something that could be, if she was willing to embrace the unknown and weigh the stakes of love anew. Scene 69. Shadows fade. The rain had finally stopped, leaving a slick sheen on the pavement that mirrored the muted afternoon light. Zaire leaned against the brick wall of the alley, his posture relaxed yet alert, every sinew coiled tightly beneath his tailored jacket. Sefina stood a few steps away, her eyes darting between him and the city beyond. The distant sirens faded into the echoing quiet, filled only by the sound of their ragged breaths. "What now?" Sefina asked, her voice brave yet laced with uncertainty. She crossed her arms, a gesture that might have seemed defensive to anyone else, but to Zaire it simply highlighted her strength. Zaire let a moment of silence stretch, his jaw clenched. "Well, the immediate threat is gone. That much we can confirm." He forced a small smile, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Yeah, and my life is still a mess." She brushed a damp curl behind her ear, revealing a stark contrast between her vibrant spirit and the wariness shadowing her features. "You're not planning to announce your superhero status and swoop in to save the day, are you?" A smirk flickered on Zaire's lips, teasing the corner of his mouth. "I might need a cape for that." He stepped closer, the air between them heavy with unspoken words. "But you're tougher than you give yourself credit for, Sefina. You've survived more than just this." Sefina's eyes softened momentarily, vulnerability shining through. "You think so?" "Absolutely." He hesitated, searching her gaze with a gravity that made the air crackle. "But you don't have to do it alone anymore." Her laugh was soft yet uncertain, as if testing whether she could let her guard down. "I don't think I'll ever truly understand what it means to rely on someone. It's like admitting I need help, and that feels unfamiliar." Zaire took a step closer, the space between them charged with a palpable tension. "Sometimes, needing help is the strongest thing you can do. You wouldn't hesitate to help someone else." "That's different," she interrupted, her voice rising slightly. "I'm always there for others, but when it comes to myself, I just stall." He matched her defiance, but with warmth, his voice low and steady. "It doesn't have to be that way. We've both got shadows hanging over us, but it's how we share them that matters." As the words settled, she searched his face, floating in the liminal space between fear and desire. "Zaire." "Please," he interjected, cutting her off with desperation lingering behind his careful control. Don't go there just yet. There's too much between us, both good and complicated. She exhaled slowly, a rhythm to steady the racing of her heart. If I were being honest, I'm afraid. Zaire's brow furrowed, the impulse to comfort strong. Afraid of what? Of breaking down, of losing everything I've worked so hard to build. It feels like every time I let someone in, another piece of me just unravels. Then let me help stitch it back together, Zaire said, his eyes probing. I can't promise perfection, but I can promise I won't let you fall apart alone. In that moment, Sefina felt something fragile shift within her. Waves of unacknowledged longing ignited in the space between them, their breath mingling like a melody shared in silence. What if I don't know how to accept something like that? Then we'll learn together. His voice was an anchor in the storm, deep and unwavering. He reached out and carefully tucked a stray lock behind her ear, the intimacy unwinding the tension that had always shadowed their encounters. You're not alone anymore. Her heart thudded like a drum, each beat resonating with newfound determination. Okay? Okay? Zaire echoed, a mixture of surprise and cautious optimism gilding his tone. Yeah, that's my answer. Let's see where this goes. The flicker of a smile tugged at her lips, a promise wrapped in hope, even as doubts lingered. Just then, a distant crash, an echo of reality intruding on their moment of connection. The urban grind of the city reminded them they weren't entirely free yet. Guess our adventure isn't over, he remarked, maintaining eye contact as tension wafted back in. But I think I can save you again at least one more time tonight. Is that another way of saying you'll make me dinner? Sefina teased, the levity of humor easing the gravity around them. Zaire chuckled, exhaling the ruinous weight of the day with ease. Only if you promise to wash the dishes afterward. Deal. Sefina grinned, the backdrop of their city's chaos dimming slightly in the warmth that flickered between them. With an assured nod, Zaire held open his arm. Let's start fresh, then. Their fingers brushed as she stepped forward, the contact igniting a spark that shimmered in the cool evening air. Scene 70. Rebuilding trust. The air in Zaire's penthouse felt different today, a lightness infusing the otherwise somber decor of charcoal walls and leather furnishings. The wide windows framed a cityscape shrouded in the soft blush of dawn, illuminating the dust that danced lazily in the morning light. Sefina perched on the edge of a luxurious deep gray couch, its surface cool against her skin, while the noise of the city below faded, leaving only the steady hum of their breathing. Zaire stood across from her, his tall silhouette backlit by the sun's embrace. He shifted slightly, his posture both protective and vulnerable. A moment passed as their gazes locked, an electric hush settling between them. For Sefina, this was uncharted territory, a world where fear and hesitation were tempered by the warmth crackling from Zaire's presence. Is it too bright in here? Zaire finally asked, his voice smooth, carrying a hint of underlying tension. He reached for the curtains, only to pause when he caught Sefina's eyes darting away. No, she said almost too quickly, her heart racing beneath the soft cotton of her shirt. She pressed her fingers against the fabric of the couch, grounding herself. It feels enlightening. He took a step closer, the subtle sound of his footfalls echoing through the otherwise silent room. Enlightening can be overwhelming, Zaire replied, a hint of concern creasing his brow. You don't have to pretend with me. A flicker of uncertainty rippled through her. Pretend? I'm not pretending, just finding my footing. She lifted her chin slightly, a protective instinct kicking in, reminding her of the strength she'd built through the years, as well as the walls she had carefully erected. Finding your footing requires balance. Zaire reached out, fingers brushing lightly against an errant curl of her hair, tucking it behind her ear. The warmth of his hand lingered there, sparking a flash of intimacy that made her breath hitch. Her heart thudded louder, and she whispered, "And what if I tip over?" "Then I'll catch you." His gaze bore into hers, filled with a promise that resonated deeper than mere words. "I won't let you fall." The vulnerable earnestness in his eyes pierced through her defenses, mingling hope with doubt. Sefina's fingers found their way to the knitted bracelet on her wrist, a habit she couldn't shake off, but today it was different. The tugging felt more like anchoring. "This doesn't mean. Trust is built, not given," he interjected swiftly, determination lacing his tone. "It's a complicated dance, Sefina. I know we've stumbled before, but I assure you, I plan to lead better this time." She studied the interplay of emotions on his face, and a smile tugged at her lips, born from a mix of affection and an archaic longing fueled by their shared past. "Then perhaps we should start with a simpler step." A playful light ignited in his dark eyes. "Like an improv dance, you do realize I have two left feet?" "I could teach you," she replied, amusement breaking the tension as she stood. "Yes, right now, in my living room. It'll be good for us, trust me." Zaire chuckled, yet there was hesitation lingering in his stance. "And how do you propose I learn to dance when I'm literally about to be swept off my feet?" That's the beauty of it," she said, her confidence building. "We'll go slow, figure it out together." Their eyes held on each other, laughter fading into something deeper. A question hung delicately in the air, heavy and charged with potential. "Come here." Zaire beckoned softly, patting the spot on the couch next to him. "No fancy footwork needed, just come sit." She stepped closer, her breath hitching at the intensity of their connection. The space now felt charged as she settled beside him, the proximity amplifying the unspoken emotions swirling between them. "Sefina," he said, his voice lower, a velvet caress. "Whatever shadows trail behind us, we have a chance to carve out something brighter. Together. I want to offer you real trust. Just let me in." The sincerity in his words brushed against the walls guarding her heart. She hesitated, then nodded slowly, the weight of her decision pressing gently but firmly on her insides. "Okay," she breathed. "Let's start small, then." Zaire reached for her hand, fingers intertwining in an effortless bond. Small steps, one dance at a time. And in that moment, surrounded by the promise of dawn and the budding potential of a fragile, blossoming trust, both sensed a new rhythm upon which they could build, one that dared them to dance through the chaos, together. Scene 71, New Beginnings. The sun hung low over the city, streaking the skyline with hues of orange and gold, a glow that felt almost ethereal against the crumbling browns of the warehouse district. Sefina Agbo stood at the rooftop's edge, her mind swirling like leaves caught in a windstorm. A gentle breeze tugged at her loose curls, brushing lightly against her cheek as she took in the view, a landscape of potential and peril intertwined. Her breath caught at the height, the city sprawling endlessly below, much like the chaotic crescendos of her life, both exhilarating and daunting. Zaire Oladipo approached quietly, his pace deliberate, the shadows of the buildings framing his tall silhouette. He stood beside her, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "Beautiful, isn't it?" he said, voice low and gravelly, pulling her from her thoughts. "It is," Sefina replied, her tone barely concealing a tremor. "Almost makes you forget the mess life can be." She forced a chuckle, but it fell flat as she turned to him, studying the creases of worry etched on his forehead. The air thickened with unspoken words, tension ricocheting between them like an electric current. Zaire turned to face her, the sunset highlighting the sharp angles of his face, his dark eyes a storm of emotions. "You're not just running from the mess, are you? You're running from us." Her heart raced. "I'm not running. I'm trying to figure things out. Everything feels so tangled right now." Her voice quivered, betraying her, and she bit her lip, stubbornly intending to hide her vulnerability. Zaire crossed his arms, the muscles in his forearms flexing with the gesture. "You think I don't know tangled? I've lived in shadows too long," he said, his tone firm but softer than steel. "But you can't keep shutting me out, Sefina. What's happening with us needs truth, not half measures." "What do you expect?" she shot back, her irritation surfacing like smoke from a fuming fire. "I've told you about my past. I'm scarred, and every time you come close, it's like I'm standing on the edge of a cliff. Do I jump or hold on to safety?" "For the love of," Zaire sighed, frustration colliding with palpable affection in his voice. "This isn't safety, it's a prison. You're here with me, yet you still pull away. I want to fight for you. I want to fight with you, not just for you." She softened, the intensity in her gaze wavering. "And what if it's not enough? What if we're just doomed?" The final word hung between them, a dark omen echoing in the fading light. "Doomed? That's a line from a bad rom-com," he said with a wry smile, breaking the tension just enough. "Also, you're way too talented to be writing off potential. I mean, have you considered that maybe, just maybe, we could create something extraordinary together?" Sefina chuckled, her laughter bubbling up and free, a balm against the heaviness. Extraordinary. You make it sound so simple. It can be, Zaire argued, his eyes sparkling with mischief. We'll unleash your inner artist. I'll sketch while you critique. We can start a gallery in a questionable alley and ruin our reputations. He leaned closer, conspiratorial. Or we could go classical, start a revolution at a fancy gala. You wear a ball gown, I'll wear a tux. Total chaos, right? Now that's a plan I could support, she said, unable to suppress her smile. But then she paused, a flicker of seriousness stealing into her expression. What if this goes wrong, Zaire? I can't lose you. I've already lost so much. The vulnerability shone through her laughter, taking Zaire by surprise. Know what? He said, stepping closer, grounding her with his presence. Let's promise each other this. No more secrets, no more running. I'll protect you from the darkness in your past the same way you've unknowingly protected me from mine. Their eyes locked, the world around them forgotten for a moment. She felt a stirring in her heart, a delicate hope beginning to blossom amidst the chaos, an invitation to begin anew. Okay, Sefina whispered, her voice steady. Let's do this. Together. Zaire reached for her hand, and the warmth of his grip sent a thrill cascading through her. Together, he echoed, a solid promise imbued with unyielding trust, one that had the power to shape their future and lift the darkness that had lingered for too long. Scene 72. A new path forward. It was one of those early spring mornings in New York City when the sun broke through the clouds with a tentative cheer, making the grit and grime of the pavement shimmer like diamonds. The aroma of fresh coffee wafted into the air, mingling with the distant sounds of honking taxis and street vendors setting up for the day. Inside Sefina Agbo's newly painted studio, sunlight cascaded through wide windows, illuminating the canvases filled with vibrant colors, much like the swirling emotions she was still learning to express. Do you really think you can just walk away from everything? Zaire Oladipo's deep voice cut through the ambiance, his arms crossed tightly over his chest as if he was bracing against a storm. The tension in the room was palpable, nearly as thick as the paint on Sefina's palette. Sefina paused, the paintbrush hovering mid-air above a bright azure stroke. Everything? Is that what you think this is? Just a whim? She shot back, her eyes flashing with an intensity that made Zaire take a half step back. It's not a whim, it's reckless, he barked, running a hand through his short-cropped hair. You don't know what you're playing with, Sefina. I've seen the way they move. They won't just let you walk away. And you think keeping me in the dark is the answer? She scoffed, throwing down the brush with a loud thud, which momentarily startled them both. You really think I'd rather live in ignorance? Like some delicate flower you need to protect? Zaire stepped closer, his fierce gaze unwavering. It's not about being delicate, it's about keeping you alive. The fierceness in his tone scared her, but something else flickered, a spark beneath his bravado. Alive? Really? And what kind of life is that? Sefina shot back, her frustrations coiling tightly in her chest. Just watching from the sidelines? Waiting for the next crisis so you can swoop in like a knight? He sighed, his shoulders slumping slightly as the anger gave way to something softer, more vulnerable. You don't understand. It kills me to see you in danger, like I'm living in slow motion, watching a car crash happen. There was a raw honesty in his voice, bearing his soul beneath the armor he usually wore. She swallowed, the tension in the air shifting, transforming the argument into something more profound. And what if I can handle it? She challenged, her voice quieter now. Zaire's expression softened, his eyes searching hers. I can't lose you, Sefina. Not like that. Then maybe you need to trust that I can fight my own battles, she replied, her heart pounding fiercely in her chest. I've fought hard to create this life for myself. It's not one you can just strip away. There was a silence that stretched between them, filled only by the distant city sounds and the smell of paint mingling with the fresh coffee from the street below. Finally, Zaire stepped forward, closing the gap, his breath warm. You're right, I should have trusted you more. Trust is a two-way street, Zaire, she reminded him, a hint of a smile breaking through her seriousness. I'll share my chaos with you if you share your whatever it is you have going on. Suddenly, Zaire chuckled, breaking the tension, and Sefina couldn't help but join him. Just so we're clear, though, he said, a teasing glint in his eye, My chaos includes several very lovely, very dangerous people, so buckle up." Sefina laughed softly, grabbing his hand and pulling him closer to where the easel stood in vivid colors. "Well, if it's chaos we're sharing, I guess my art can handle a little storm." His thumb traced the vibrant colors on the canvas, lingering over the blues and purples. "And who knew you were this good?" "Careful now," she teased, leaning into him, their laughter illuminating the charged space between them. "Next thing I know, you'll claim credit for my genius." As their eyes locked, the air filled not just with laughter but with unspoken promises. Sefina could sense the shifting tides within Zaire, and in that moment she realized they were both determining the course of their lives together, marching forward, perhaps with some trepidation, but together nonetheless. "Together, then," he murmured, bringing their intertwined fingers closer to his heart. "Together," she echoed, her heart beating in sync with his resolve. And at that moment, amidst colors and sunlight, they began to reclaim what had been lost, paving the way forward into a future that felt uncertain yet undeniably theirs. Scene 73. Light follows darkness. The kitchen was alive with a warm golden glow as Zaire busied himself making breakfast. The aroma of caramelizing onions and garlic wafted through the air, mingling with the sweetness of berries that he'd meticulously arranged on a plate. He moved with a grace that belied the strength hidden beneath his fitted shirt, a magnetism that had always attracted Sefina, even when the weight of their world seemed insurmountable. Outside, a heavy rain had begun to fall, the droplets drumming against the window with a rhythmic insistence, echoing the tumultuous emotions swirling within Sefina. She stood at the edge of the kitchen, clutching a cup of steaming coffee as she watched him, her heart caught between admiration and uncertainty. "So you're chef now?" she teased lightly, though the jest didn't quite disguise the tremor in her voice. Zaire shot her a charming grin over his shoulder, unabashed. "Only for you. I figured if I can't get you to relax any other way, maybe breakfast would do the trick." He glanced back to the skillet, flipping a perfectly cooked omelet with deft precision. Sefina took a sip of her coffee, the warmth spreading through her as she considered his words. "You're trying to seduce me through breakfast? I think that's a culinary crime." She raised an eyebrow, but her smile betrayed her amusement. "Surely you'd prefer this to me trying to woo you with a poem about the moon," Zaire shot back, chuckling as he placed the omelet on a plate. "Besides, I write the kind of poetry that brings tears to your eyes, not butterflies to your stomach." "You could say I've had my fill of poetic disasters," Sefina admitted, her voice softening. She stepped closer to the counter, the proximity amplifying the tension in the air. Zaire noticed the way her fingers trembled slightly as she set her cup down, a small act revealing the unsteady ground beneath her. As he served her breakfast, their fingers brushed, and Sefina inhaled sharply, the electric contact sending a jolt through her, reminding her of the indecision that had plagued her since their lives had become entangled. "Zaire, what are we doing?" she blurted out, her voice barely above a whisper, yet heavy with meaning. "We're making breakfast." He paused, searching her eyes. "But I think you're asking more than that." He stepped closer, close enough for her to feel the heat radiating from his body, a warmth that intertwined with the chill of the rain outside. "You don't have to pretend with me." "Sometimes I think that's all I know how to do," Sefina confessed, vulnerability seeping into her tone. "Pretend that everything's fine, that I'm fine." She looked away, focusing on the rain, each droplet draping the world outside in layers of silver, punctuating the chaos that had stolen her peace. "Fine doesn't suit you." Zaire's voice was gentle but firm, like a solid ground after a storm. "You deserve more than pretending. You deserve connection and trust." She shook her head, feeling the weight of his words settle uncomfortably on her shoulders. "And what if I mess it all up? What if I can't?" Her voice trailed off. "Then we'll figure it out together." His gaze pierced through the space, imploring her, urging her to see past the pain and fear that held her captive. There was a storm raging outside, but in this moment, the kitchen felt like a sanctuary. Zaire's hands cupped her face, the touch surprisingly soft against her skin. "You can trust me, Sefina. You don't have to carry this alone." He leaned in, his breath warm like the sunlight that sought to break through the clouds, their noses almost brushing. She could feel the walls she had built around her heart crumbling, piece by piece, under the weight of his gaze. "I'm scared," she admitted, her voice barely a whisper, her heart pounding as she clasped his wrists, grounding herself in the moment. "Good." He smiled teasingly, a hint of mischief in his eyes. "Fear is a sign that you're alive. Just don't let it control you." Sefina managed a laugh, tension lifting just enough to see the humor. "Zaire Oladipo, life coach extraordinaire?